Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys been enjoying the content channel as of late. Excuse me if my voice is a little bit low, it's just a little bit late at night, so I'm just trying to keep my voice a little bit low because everyone's sleeping. Um, but I have an interesting topic for today. I don't know if I will be dedicating too much time for this topic, just because I think my overall opinion of this is pretty, upfront. But I have two reasons for why I wanted to do this video. First of which is because I've actually been getting interested into reading, which I know sounds kind of like what, you know, but been kind of interested in reading a little bit. Some of which, like, books that I actually have, and other ones that I haven't. And I will admit, uh, some of those involve being graphic novels, yes, comics. Like, I've been kind of curious to actually kind of dip into that world a little bit and see, you know, uh, if I jive with it or not. Um, but because I do have books, some books here or there. I actually have the book that inspired Blade Runner, and I love that film. So I've been rather curious to read it, but just never gotten like I've never had the spirit to read. But I don't know why, but just lately that spirit has been kind of fueled a little bit, and mostly with the idea of comics. I don't know why, just something about that just kind of piqued my interest. Even though I'm fatigued on superhero films, I'm just kind of curious to know a little more about certain material, I guess. So, um, but I'm still wishy-washy on it because I also am like I'm like about to be 25 this year, so it's like I don't know, it feels kind of childish to be reading comics. I don't know. But the other reason I wanted to do this video was actually something that I literally just read just now that actually got me up from my bed to just record, because I figured that this actually is a nice gateway to this topic, which is a apparently it's something that happened. When did this happen? Yeah, this happened just now. With a film from A24 being developed called Deep Cuts, which is apparently based off of a novel, which I believe is of the same name. Um, the person who was originally meant to star in it, Adessa Azian, probably butchered the hell out of her name, sorry. She apparently had just pulled out of the film via Instagram story, by the way, which is kind of weird. So it doesn't seem like she actually discussed this with the filmmaker, just pretty much just put it out on her Instagram page that she's like, nope, I'm not gonna commit to it even to it anymore. Um, and yeah, and the reason for why she backed out of the project, um, which, mind you, apparently they're supposed to be shooting this movie next month, so that's not great. Um, Apparently, for the reason why she did it was because she apparently just realized that the character that she was going to be playing originally was based off of a a half Mexican, half Jewish character, and she herself apparently is not of that descent, so she's pulling out for that reason, and she has no idea of which because she's not read the book. Now, that story specifically, I feel like is just a bit ridiculous because it's like, well, if you're already committed and shooting is literally that soon, it's like I feel like it's a bit of a disservice to the production. I understand, it's her decision. She can, say whatever she feels and does whatever she feels, but at the same time, also just if she literally had to make that announcement on Instagram and not inform the filmmaker privately, I don't know, just all that stuff just seems kind of um, and also I have not read that story entirely, so I could be completely wrong about how that message was relayed. But it had me, like I've been wanting to do a video like this, and I feel like that is a nice gateway to this conversation because um, there's always been a debate when it comes to film adaptations and the validity of them and what is the proper viewing and watching said material. There will be some people who tell you that, oh, remake, you got to read the books before you go watch the films, and then there will be people who tell you that, well, you should. It's who cares? I mean, it's a film, so you should just go and see that and forget the books. And I lean more towards the latter, obviously, because, well, not being much of a reader myself, I usually gravitate more towards films. And I usually view films through a certain prism. So, I, expect films to operate as they stand. And I don't really believe that needing to read up on material that is just being adapted in certain ways is going to be helpful. I think in any ways, in some ways, to really get into it, I think that um, reading a book before you watch a movie actually kind of filters out your experience in some ways, because now you have these expectations already set with certain things that happened, whether it be in a comic book, whether it be in just a regular book, whether it be this and that. You're gonna want to hear things, you're gonna want to see things, and you're gonna have these expectations of how characters operate or how they function. And I I don't feel comfortable like feeling that way when I go see a film. I like actually going into films rather blind. Sure, I'll watch a trailer here and there, but ultimately I like to walk into them rather blind, and I like to experience it in the moment rather than having these things already procured for me, whether it be in a book or whether it be in this and that. It's just I don't like to reference material because to me it doesn't really matter in the framework of a movie. Now, in adapting a book, though, there is also the discussion of the loyalties to that book. When it comes to, uh, in the case of this specific actress stepping away for the reason of which, it's a bit humorous for me that you were about to shoot this movie next month and you didn't bother to read the book. I don't know, like, and that's the double edged sword that I'm also kind of getting at as well, is that the necessities, there, because when it comes to adapting source material, as I said up front, it is purely of just taking fragments of that book and wishing to inspire a screenplay. So for her, she probably just read the screenplay and she thought that sounds great, and I'm going to go ahead and do this project. For then the online community to call her out saying, "Hey, this person's actually meant to be this," and she made her decisions. Um, but um, there's people who will probably tell you like, "Oh, well, uh, reading the books, or being faithful to the books, that should be the expectation going into these movies." Not necessarily so. I mean, some films do great without having to rely upon being one for one to the books. Case in point, at least in my opinion, The Shining. The Shining, I think, is one of the best films, or at least one of my personal favorites. And Stephen King notoriously hated the adaptation because it wasn't faithful, it went about in its own way. And at least it's regarded, at least to me anyway, one of my favorites. And it's regarded to be one of the best horror films, or at least one of those popular horror films out there. So, um, and then Doctor Sleep came along, and Stephen King liked that version because it probably stayed more faithful to what the source material was. But in my overall view, I think that it is an inferior film compared to what The Shining does. Doesn't mean I hate that movie, but it's to bring out a point that just because you adapt something, it doesn't mean that you have to be one for one, and it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be, you know, it's automatically going to work well. I mean, if we're going to talk about Stephen King, look at the It films. Uh, there's specific things in those books. There's a, forgive me, for using a certain word here on YouTube, but there is an orgy scene that happened, or that apparently is in the original book. with all the kids. Clearly, they're not going to want to adapt that because that is not suitable for anybody, and it is also going to make that movie possibly a higher rating, which is going to limit their audiences, is going to limit how much money that movie can actually make. So, adapting a book is more or less adapting the idea. Like that whole staple that you see on films based on a true story. Everybody knows what the hell that means. When you see based on a true story, it is that their way of saying, hey, look, we're taking the event and then we're putting our own spin on it. That's essentially what it means. And it's the same thing that happens when we talk about film adaptations. They're taking the book, they're looking at the essence of it, or they're looking at specific aspects of that book, and they are choosing to use that as an inspiration to when they write the screenplay. So, so, and hey, I mean, if you walk into a film and you're familiar with the source material, you know, as long as you're able to make that distinction between the film and the source material, I think then it's in some ways it could be a lot more informative. But at the same time, if you choose to allow the material to dictate whatever the movie is, that could lead to a certain perspective that I feel is filtered and not genuine. Some people will just go into things because, oh my God, I love source material, and they watch the film and they love it, but they're riding the high only by what they read or by what the film references from said book, and not necessarily how the film's being told, you know, and all the flaws that may in fact be there, as a result of the filmmaking. So 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 it has me curious, with like these superhero films coming out this year. I'm actually kind of curious to place myself in that state. Maybe with this new Supergirl film, I know that there's a comic inspired by it. Obviously, um, what was it called? A Woman of Tomorrow. Uh, I was actually kind of looking into it, and I'm curious to actually put myself in that space to read something, know what it's about, know the source material, and then go watch the film adaptation and see how I feel about it. Because I've never had that experience personally. But even with that, I would think, even with reading the book, I would think this is still a film proper and I have to judge it on that merit. And, whatever it is that I can remember of the book, that's just a bonus, but it's not what dictating factor of my overall experience with the movie. If you're able to do that, that's great. But some people choose to look at the book as the only thing, and the movie is just an extension of their love of said book, right? Or sometimes people will get angry because the movie's not doing exactly what they want it to do. Look at a film coming out next year or next month, Wuthering Heights. There's some people who probably are not as happy about the movie. And if you ask me, the studio doesn't seem so happy about the movie either, at least the reception of it so far, because it seems overly sexualized and it seems to be more portrayed in a horny type of atmosphere. And if you look at the marketing, they've actually kind of switched that around, so they're not even they're downplaying it, playing what the original teaser was. Um, but the point that I'm trying to get at is that reading the book does not automatically make the movie better, and watching the movie does not automatically mean that the book is good or bad. It's just they're two different worlds, two different environments, two different forms of viewership as well. I mean, as reading a book and watching a movie scientifically also do different things for the brain. There's an argument to be made that books are probably more helpful than films in ways of how they actually impact the brain. Um, but but they're just two different mediums. They cross over mainly due to film, but they are very different things. So to have one of these things dictate over each other, I just in the case of movies, it's different because it's a visual medium, and it's things being done, live action or animated. It's things that are being created out of the inspiration of what they wrote, what they read, or what they've gleaned from the books. But it shouldn't dictate exactly how that movie should be shaped. Nor should your viewership of the movie dictate the the potential of what that book probably was. So so yeah. So a film is a film, and ultimately it's going to be made purely by the merit of what the filmmaker believes it's so, or more frankly, what the studio thinks it's so. And if it's faithful, it's faithful. If it's not, there's hopefully a good reason for it, you know. And that boils down more to a fan base and not necessarily to an audience, because some things just have to be changed in order for the people to show up to make them money. Again, no one was going to go see it if that orgy scene came up in the movie. Nobody was going to go watch the movie if that was the case. So, so yeah. So that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts. A book is a book and a film is a film. They do intertwine in the cases of adapting the work, but it doesn't mean that something has to dictate one thing over the other. They are, at the end of the day, two very different mediums. So, but you guys, let me know. You guys, let me know. I mean, obviously, it's a very specific topic, and like I said, kind of curious about reading, kind of curious about comics. Again, seems kind of weird though for me because I'm like literally 25 years old, and also like I like it, but I don't know if I'm like loving it. I'm just kind of curious. I'm just curious to dip my toes into that space. But I also get into these little habits every so often, so it might just literally be just how I feel for a few days, and then all of a sudden I'm just back to doing what I usually do. But let me know all your thoughts in regards to film adaptations and your thoughts on books being brought to the big screen, and how you feel about just that overall just orb of those specific kinds of films, and your feelings about books that you may have read being translated, and how you take to those movies. Can you watch them as movies, or do you always have to consider the book? Let me know. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.